Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel McLean. Rachel McLean returned home to Blackpool, UK, for the summer of 1990. She was 18 years old and had just finished her first year at Oxford. Rachel was very busy with her studies and spent all her free time studying. She had a healthy lifestyle and played sports. Rachel had many friends and loved heavy metal music. She joined a local charity where she worked during the summer. While on a day off, Rachel was relaxing with friends at a local club when she met a bartender named John Turner, who had long brown hair. John was from Nottingham and had returned to Blackpool for the summer. Rachel found him attractive and easy to talk to, so they quickly became interested in each other. That night, they chatted. John attended Rachel's 19th birthday party. After the party, they had a passionate night together. According to John, their relationship continued to develop. However, at the end of the summer, Rachel had to return to Oxford, and John returned to Nottingham. The two cities were just over 2 hours' drive apart, so they could easily visit each other. They spent weekends together and kept in touch by letter and phone during the week. John wrote Rachel long love letters, which she enjoyed. John Turner was born in HMP, but as a child he moved to New Zealand with his parents and settled in a city called Bath. The family lived in 2 countries before John returned to the UK to study at King's College. During his time there, he won the hearts of both students and teachers. He hosted a show on the local college radio station twice a week and was a talented athlete on the soccer team. Rachel McLean was a promising student. Her literature teacher at college admired her achievements. Rachel started college in the same year as John. On Christmas, Rachel invited John to meet her parents and they had a nice evening together. Rachel's parents were very happy with her choice, finding John intelligent, good-looking and confident. John became increasingly infatuated with Rachel but was saddened by the distance between them. During this time, she moved into a student apartment on the first floor of the school with 4 other students. John felt anxious and jealous because one of her neighbors was a man and the boys often visited her house. To cope, he wrote and called her constantly. However, Rachel was very busy with work and study. Since there were no mobile phones in those days, they could only communicate by landline. She would often come home at the end of the evening, exhausted, and go straight to bed. She did not have the opportunity to communicate with John regularly. His dissatisfaction increased with each missed call and he became increasingly jealous. His possessiveness became evident during this time and he complained to her, which began to annoy Rachel. On February 11th, she sent him a Valentine's card, calling him the only love of her life. However, around that time, she wrote in her diary about her lover in very unflattering terms. It seemed that she had doubts about whether John was the person she could spend the rest of her life with. On Valentine's Day, John proposed to her, but she unexpectedly refused, which shocked him. She explained that she was not ready. John said that he understood and would wait. They continued their relationship, calling each other occasionally and rarely seeing each other. 2 months later, in April, they planned to spend the Easter holidays together. John went to Blackpool again on Saturday, and Rachel's mother took her back to Oxford because she had important school matters to attend to on Sunday. They planned to have a quiet day together at her student flat, as it was their last weekend before Rachel's exams. Rachel spent a lot of time preparing for her exams. While she was studying, her boyfriend was watching football in the living room because he was a Nottingham fan. That weekend, the team played in the FA Cup semi-finals, so the next day John got on the train and returned to Nottingham. There was no one in the student flat all week, because the young people had gone home for the holidays. Everyone wanted to spend time with their loved ones, because they wouldn't have the chance until the end of the year. By Monday, her roommates began to return, eager to see Rachel and hear about her weekend. However, Rachel was missing. Her room was empty, the windows were open, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. The students assumed she was busy with other activities. On Wednesday, her boyfriend, John, tried to call her, but she did not answer. They had planned to stay in touch, but Rachel did not return his calls. John assumed that she was busy and did not want to bother her. However, after 2 days of silence, which was unusual since their relationship had only recently improved, John began to worry. He called again, but still received no response. The next day, he tried again, but was unsuccessful. There was no social media at the time, so John left a message on her answering machine. But she remained silent. He also sent her a letter by regular mail, which he sent as soon as he got home. The letter arrived in New Mexico on Thursday, and John thanked Rachel for a wonderful weekend and wished her luck with her exams. On April 19, 1991, 19-year-old Rachel failed to show up for her exam, which was especially worrying because she had been studying hard and the exam was extremely important to her. When the exam proctors tried to contact her, they were unsuccessful. Her parents also had no idea where she was, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The Oxford police were initially skeptical. They received dozens of missing student reports each month because parents went to the police station after parties. In 99% of cases, teens sobered up from drinking and returned to school within 24 hours. But that was not the case. This diligent student had been missing for days and had not been heard from at all. None of her friends knew where she was, so the police became interested in what had happened. They immediately went to the apartment where Rachel had gone missing. Detective Susie Krug was looking for information about the students who had been in the same room as Rachel. Victoria Clare, Margaret Smith, Sarah Hume, and John Forby. The friends immediately pointed to Rachel's boyfriend, who was annoying everyone with his jealousy. They showed a letter he had sent from Nottingham around the time Rachel went missing. The neighbors also confirmed that John Turner was the last person Rachel had been in contact with. The room they checked showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, struggle, or blood. Everything was in its place. The police found Rachel's diary, which might contain important clues. The police began to study the contents of the diary. They knew that John was possessive and jealous of his girlfriend, wanting to know her whereabouts and presence at all times. This behavior gradually began to annoy Rachel. Their conflicts often arose over this issue. On April 22, police met with John Turner. 22. During the conversation, John expressed concern about his missing girlfriend. He was asked to describe his activities during the time Rachel went missing. John mentioned that they had a great weekend together and that everything was fine before they broke up. He said that he woke up early, showered, and that they had sex in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to Oxford Station together at around 4:15 p.m., taking a bus. They had a few hours before their train arrived, and while waiting, they bumped into a friend of Rachel's at around 5 p.m. The three of them went to a local coffee shop and had coffee. Rachel's friend was described as a dark-skinned man with long hair, wearing ripped jeans and a black jacket. He was similar in appearance to John, except for his dark skin. John admitted that he could not remember the man's name because they had just met and he did not expect to become friends with him. According to John, the man offered to drive Rachel home in his car. She agreed, and then John and Rachel said goodbye. John returned to Nottingham, while Rachel went with her friend to her apartment. However, John's story about the man was very suspicious. The police suspected that John was lying, and he quickly became the prime suspect in Rachel's disappearance, as she had been missing for a long time, leading to concerns that she might be dead or imprisoned. Urgent action was needed. First, it was important to learn more about the prime suspect, as he was the last known person to have had contact with Rachel, and his story about a black man needed further investigation. Rachel's disappearance left everyone baffled because none of her roommates or friends remembered her having such a friend. In order to gather more witnesses, the police shared information about the case. From the beginning, there was no reason to think that she had run away. The police first checked this possibility by talking to Rachel's family and friends. Rachel had no problems with her loved ones, friends, studies, or personal life. She was eagerly preparing for exams, which made it impossible for her to not attend. Rachel never complained about any problems, nor did she suffer from drug addiction or mental problems. People like her usually do not run away, and all of her belongings were left untouched. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility that she had run away on purpose. The police were skeptical of John's testimony and assigned a police officer to approach him and gain his trust. The officer's job was to observe John's reactions and behavior while updating him on the investigation. From the beginning, the officer suspected John of lying to them, noticing that he became nervous when talking about Rachel, despite his attempts to hide it. Despite these suspicions, a week of surveillance did not reveal any useful information to help the case. Meanwhile, the police were searching the neighborhood for witnesses, K-9 units were working with dogs, and divers were examining local waters. Several people remembered seeing John, but no one could confirm that he had left the house with Rachel. In addition, he had not been behaving suspiciously, so this witness's testimony did not add anything to the search. During this time, John continued to cooperate with the investigation. He even helped create a composite sketch of the man who, according to him, was supposed to drive Rachel back to her apartment. John believes this friend was responsible for her abduction. It has now been 2 weeks and police believe she is no longer alive. No ransom demands have been made, ruling out kidnapping as a motive. Search teams, including police, rescue workers, and volunteers, have scoured a large area around Oxford, including drains and boating holes, but their efforts have been in vain. The police examined Rachel's diary and discovered her true feelings for John, a disturbing mix of hatred and pity. She expressed that she was unable to confront him directly or leave because she was afraid. Rachel had no genuine feelings for John, and her Valentine's Day gestures were more like a duty than a genuine expression of love. She knew that John was unstable and prone to losing control when angry. Afraid to face this reality, she admitted that their closeness was harmful and needed to end. In stark contrast, John described their relationship as happy, often emphasizing their frequent sexual activity during interrogations. Meanwhile, Rachel wrote of her disgust for him but felt powerless to stop their closeness. The police believe he may have killed her after reading her diary and discovering her true feelings, but more evidence is needed to prove his guilt. John has been actively cooperating with the investigation. He has attended a press conference to draw public attention to the search for Rachel and to help reconstruct the last day he spent with her. John describes the events at the station, claiming that a stranger, whom he says was a dark-skinned friend of Rachel's, was involved in her disappearance. The plan is to closely monitor John's reactions and behavior during these events, as experienced journalists can identify inconsistencies in his story. Many people have noted that John's description of the dark-skinned guy closely matches his appearance, including his clothing, except for his skin color. It is as if he was trying to describe himself but changing his race. In addition, the public took note of John's strange reactions when asked if he thought Rachel was still alive. He vaguely stated, in his heart, he wanted to think so, which further aroused suspicion among the conference attendees. Throughout the conversation, the guy's smile never seemed to disappear. This event greatly promoted the investigation into Rachel's disappearance. Several random witnesses who were watching the press conference on television clearly remembered the events of the day the girl disappeared at the train station. They contacted the police, saying that only John was at the cafe at the station. There was no girl or anyone else with him. Among the witnesses was a man sitting at the next table. He noticed that John seemed very nervous while drinking coffee, constantly looking around and startled. According to this witness, at one point, John took out a piece of paper and started writing. Perhaps Rachel was no longer alive at that time, and John began writing the same letter he had sent immediately after arriving in Notting. All this was done to create an alibi for himself. It has been established that John and Rachel went to the station together by bus, although there were no cameras there at that time. However, during that time in the city, all passengers who boarded the bus and paid for their tickets were monitored by special electronic devices. It was impossible to ride without paying. When checked, it was discovered that Rachel had not paid for the trip, which showed that she was not with John and could not have been there that day. Therefore, John lied. The reason for his lie remains unclear, and it is still unknown where Rachel's body could be. Police suspected that her remains might still be in the student apartment or somewhere on campus. Surveillance cameras covered the area around the building, but none of them showed John carrying any large, suspicious items. Police requested a floor plan of the student dormitory and discovered that there were voids under the floorboards. Police returned to the apartment where Rachel had lived and removed the floorboards. There, they found her body tightly packed in a bag, only 20 centimeters high. The cold weather at the time slowed the body's decomposition. In addition, the space between floors was structurally well ventilated, so the decomposing body did not emit a foul odor and was not discovered until 19 days after her death. Because Rachel's body was so well preserved, the forensic expert was able to determine the circumstances of her death with a high degree of accuracy within an hour. John was then questioned by the police. Initially, he refused to answer police questions. However, the next day, he confessed to killing Rachel. He said that after watching a football match, he proposed to Rachel, hoping that she would accept, but she refused. The couple exchanged a few words. As a result, he lost his temper and attacked her. In his confession, John admitted that he did not understand why she refused to get engaged. She did not want to answer for a long time but finally admitted that she had been having an affair and that she was not sure that she was ready to commit her life to John. In response, he insulted her. Rachel tried to hit him, and after the slap, he lost control and pinned her down on the chair with his weight, preventing her from moving. John claimed that he did not remember what happened next. When he regained consciousness, he found himself sitting on a couch in front of Rachel's lifeless body. Forensic experts confirmed that Rachel had been strangled. There was a deep, thin mark on her neck, indicating the use of an object rather than hands. The tie Rachel had given him for Christmas was missing from the crime scene and from John's belongings. Believed to have been used to kill her. After a while, he decided to dispose of the body. Unable to get the body out of the building, he put it in a bag, removed the floorboards from Rachel's room, and stuffed the body into a small space. He then quietly reinstalled the floorboards. John then packed his things and headed to the bus station. While waiting for the train at a coffee shop, he wrote a letter to Rachel. In the letter, he thanked her for the weekend they spent together and mentioned a black man who was supposed to drive her home, which was a made-up story. He had invented this character to support the lie he had created. He also expressed concern for his girlfriend, who would be alone for several days. After sending the letter, he called her several times and left messages on her answering machine. John then wrote another letter, addressed to Rachel in New Mexico, saying that he had tried to call her several times during the week and was very worried, hoping she would call back soon. This deception allowed him to fool the police and the public for 19 days. Afterward, despite his confession, John Turner maintained his innocence. In December 1991, John claimed that his actions were in self-defense. He wanted to avoid a life sentence for premeditated murder, so he argued that the girl's death was accidental. Rachel was described as argumentative and unfaithful, often insulting John. John also stressed the humiliation he suffered at the hands of Rachel. He had erectile dysfunction due to the disease and claimed that she constantly criticized him for it. This was especially difficult during the outbreak when he was unable to have sex with her due to pain in his groin and abdomen. In court, his lawyer portrayed him as the victim. He was a caring man in love, dreamed of marrying Rachel and proposed to her twice, both times being rejected. Of course, all of this is not true, because judging by the diary entries, the girl was generally uncomfortable with intimate contact with John. There is no evidence that Rachel had any intrigue or relationship with anyone else. Rachel's close friends did not know about any other guy. Many believe that she made up the story of the affair to justify her quick breakup with John, but it is possible that she never actually said this, it was just his word. In the end, the jury did not believe John and he was sentenced to life in prison, with the right to parole. John's story does not end there. While serving his sentence, he developed a relationship with a 20-year-old woman who looked exactly like Rachel. She learned about him through a newspaper article and became interested, believing that he had been wrongly convicted. Despite being imprisoned, they began a romantic relationship. Lawyers continued to fight for John's release and maintained his innocence. In 2003, after 11 years behind bars, John was paroled. He returned to New Zealand, intending to start his life over. His girlfriend, whom he met while in prison, followed him to New Zealand to attend university in Whanganui, the city where John lived. Apparently, 11 years in prison did not benefit John because he then attacked and began strangling the new girl, who believed he was innocent. John was 49 at the time. Fortunately, the attack was not serious and the girl was able to escape without serious injury. According to several witnesses and victims, John had lost control of his temper several times in the 6 months leading up to the incident. It was clear that he had anger management issues. John often became jealous and turned small problems into big arguments, often insulting his partner in front of others. Some time after the initial incident, the situation recurred and he attacked her again. During this time, the couple were staying at a motel in the city of Whanganui. There, they argued again. John threw his girlfriend onto the bed, raised his fists and punched her in the face while holding her down with his weight. However, he regained his composure and left the room. A few hours later, the girl texted John, saying that she was ending the relationship. She said that he was dangerous and needed to attend an anger management program. In response, he flew into a rage again, returned to the motel and stormed into the room. He attacked her, tore her clothes off, demanded sex, hit her on the head several times and threatened to kill her. In 2018, the girl reported John to the police and he was charged with assault. He was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. The sentence was relatively light because the conviction occurred in New Zealand. If the attack had happened in the UK, he would have faced a life sentence. Despite the attack, his new girlfriend told the media that she believes anger management is still an issue for John and that he needs help. She hopes he can control his anger and that they can rekindle their relationship, despite the mental and physical abuse he has inflicted on her. In court, she admitted that he had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him, although she did not take the threat seriously. John has recently been released from prison, but his current situation is unknown. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Shuett. Jennifer Shuett was an 8-year-old girl who had just finished school for the day. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who worked hard to ensure that her daughter was happy and well taken care of. Elaine juggled multiple jobs to support their family and give Jennifer a joyful childhood. With all the love and attention she received, Jennifer grew into a bright and cheerful child, showing a strong enthusiasm for learning and a natural curiosity at such a young age. Jennifer mentioned that children often fear the dark, and she was no different. She admitted that she was afraid of the dark and often slept in the same room as her mother. She recalled that from what she could remember about her childhood, she just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, and so she felt comforted by going to bed with her mom. She stated that it was just the two of them, and they relied on each other. That night, on August 9, 2009, Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, shared a room. Jennifer was restless, tossing and turning and occasionally kicking her mom, which made it hard for Elaine to fall asleep. At 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to return to her own room since she had to get up early for work. In response, Jennifer said, "Mom, I love you, so I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went back to her room. Elaine would later deeply regret this decision, but at that moment, she had no way of knowing what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine found that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She saw that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any sounds or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It's important to note that their apartment was on the first floor, and Jennifer's windows overlooked the parking lot. This made Elaine worry that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered her room through the window. Elaine understood that their apartment wasn't the best place for her and her young daughter, but it was all they could afford at that time. However, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by buying a small house nearby and renovating it. Jennifer and her mother were set to move into the new house in a few months. The day before Jennifer went missing, they had been working in the garden there, where Jennifer had been bitten by mosquitoes, making it difficult for her to sleep peacefully that night. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was heartbroken. She expressed that Jennifer was her only child and begged for her safe return. The police dedicated themselves to finding her. Fortunately, Elaine received news sooner than expected. Later that day, around 6:30 p.m., the police got a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and discovered something alarming. To their shock, they realized it was a young girl. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett's body in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer was in a serious condition, but she was still breathing. She had a deep cut across her throat. The most life-threatening injury was this wound, which led to significant blood loss and left her very pale and weak. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors worked hard to save her life. One doctor recalled that when he first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, and covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. He mentioned that she couldn't make any sounds because of the injury to her neck. Fortunately, he added that after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. He stated that they had completed her surgery, her airway was stable, and she wasn't bleeding, so they were very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. She later recounted that she had been kind of a hard patient to deal with because she had a lot of male doctors, and she was scared of males. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to comfort her daughter by explaining that everyone present was there to help her. Despite this, Jennifer remained distrustful of those around her. Her behavior became clearer when she disclosed what had happened to her that night. An investigator noted that they knew they had a survivor who couldn't speak and that the challenge was getting information from her. After all, she was only 8 years old, so it was tough. Because Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigator, the detectives provided her with a notebook and pens. They asked her to write down her answers to their questions. Jennifer communicated through notes to her mother, who then relayed the note to the officer. Surprisingly, her written responses were very detailed and accurately described the events. Despite her young age, Jennifer demonstrated impressive intelligence. According to the note, that night, Jennifer entered her room, turned on the light, and picked up a book to read, hoping it would make her sleepy. It worked, and she soon fell asleep. Suddenly, she woke up to find the stranger carrying her out of the house. She said that he was running with her down the sidewalk and that she tried to scream, but he covered her nose and mouth. Afterward, he put her in a car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. Immediately, Jennifer felt that something was off, as she noticed her mother's car in the parking lot, which left her puzzled about their destination. While she understood that police are generally trusted, her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers. Jennifer recalled that as a child, she had wanted to believe the stranger, but the lessons she had learned about strangers in school, along with her fear of the dark, told her that something was seriously wrong. When they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer suggested that he could drop her off there, but he replied that he couldn't because they were not home. At that moment, she realized that he was lying since their car was parked in the driveway. The man had stopped near Jennifer's school, which was about 3 kilometers from her house. He had told her to watch the moon closely and said that when it changed color, her mother would arrive to pick her up. Jennifer recalled waiting anxiously for her mother's headlights, but they never appeared. At that moment, she sensed that the man was mentally preparing himself for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger remarked that her mom wasn't coming, so they needed to go farther. He then drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street and stopped the car. Jennifer once again sought confirmation that he was a genuine policeman. She mentioned that she was questioning him and needed him to prove he was an officer. She asked him where his gun and badge were. He responded that his gun was in the back seat of the car. As Jennifer turned to look for it, the suspicious officer removed her underwear. Jennifer lost track of time while in the stranger's grip because she passed out. She only became aware of her surroundings again when he was pulling her by her ankles through the field. Despite the intense pain caused by twigs and stones pressing into her back, she acted as if she were dead and remained silent, knowing that this was her opportunity to survive. He eventually released her feet and left her alone in the field. Jennifer heard him walking away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the engine starting as he drove off. She realized that she couldn't scream and didn't understand why. She managed to place her right hand on her neck and felt a deep wound. Looking at her hand, she saw it covered in blood. Since the exact time of her disappearance was unknown, it was thought that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, she noticed the lights of passing cars nearby. She heard children's voices and a dog that approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but the owner never came. During this time, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay awake. Jennifer stated that every time she regained consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. She said she wasn't afraid and had accepted that she might not survive. Suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and then something hit her leg. When Jennifer next regained consciousness, she heard a police officer saying, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me." She remembered being loaded into the life flight helicopter. This experience was very difficult for young Jennifer because she couldn't speak and had to communicate by writing everything down. Her fear of men added to the tension, so her mother asked the questions, and Jennifer's responses were passed on to the officers outside the door. Remarkably, 8-year-old Jennifer was able to get the stranger's name. I just remember recalling his name, so I wrote that he said his name was Dennis. I remember thinking he looked greasy and that he might have had a scar or something on his face. For days after Jennifer went missing, the police enlisted the help of forensic expert Lois Gibson. She communicated with Jennifer using gestures and notes. Despite these difficulties, they created a detailed composite sketch of a man, which was released to the public in hopes of receiving information. While this was happening, police searched the crime scene and discovered Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Unfortunately, DNA testing on the clothing did not yield any matches to a suspect. Jennifer's recovery took time, but she demonstrated incredible strength for someone her age. There was a particularly tough moment when she became upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and made a faint sound. Doctors were surprised because her vocal cords had been nearly severed, and they didn't expect them to heal, yet they started to recover. Soon after, Jennifer was released from the hospital. She returned home and resumed her studies. After finishing school and college, she chose to become a children's librarian. However, she never forgot the traumatic events of that night. Every day felt like a search for her attacker. She wondered if he could be anyone around her. Could it be our new neighbor? Someone at the post office or the grocery store? Is he watching us? Will he come back to finish what he started? Fortunately, Jennifer met a man named Jonathan, and for the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone. They fell in love. Meanwhile, the investigation into her attacker stalled. The chances of finding him diminished as time passed, and the case remained unresolved, moving from one investigator to another without progress. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. She learned that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over her case and that he wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. He told her that he would do whatever he could in his power until the end of his career to get her the answers she needed for the case. Tim decided to involve FBI Special Agent Richard Renison in the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas Police Department before joining the FBI. Together, Tim and Richard uncovered a significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Key pieces of evidence included Jennifer's underwear, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on these items to the lab in Quantico, Virginia. While detectives recognized that DNA analysis technology had improved significantly over the past 19 years, they also knew that the age of the case would make it less of a priority in the lab. Investigating cold cases often comes with the challenge of time, as witnesses forget, people move away, and some may even pass away. However, one advantage of this case's age was the advancements in DNA technology that could aid their investigation. A year later, their efforts were finally recognized. The man whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same name that Jennifer had identified years earlier. Remarkably, the 8-year-old girl had been extremely precise in her descriptions. Despite being on pain medication, unable to speak, and only 8 years old, she wrote down the name Dennis. This was a significant indication of her accuracy. In fact, it later became clear just how precise she was about many details. Dennis Bradford, now 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA had been entered into the national database after he assaulted a woman in a bar in 1996. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison but only served 4. On February 4, 2000, he was conditionally released, and less than a year later, he was arrested for driving under the influence, just half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison looked into the connection between a suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Dickinson, Texas, a small town. They discovered that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses located within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To verify that he was the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the photo, they were shocked because it resembled the composite sketch made with input from 8-year-old Jennifer. One detective asked if Dennis had ever heard the name Jennifer Schuett, to which he replied affirmatively. The detective then inquired if Dennis had ever had the occasion to come into contact with her, and the suspect again confirmed this. When asked to elaborate, Dennis hesitated, stating that it was a lot to explain, but he believed that if the detective were to see her, he would be extremely proud of her. Finally, and the suspect stated that Jennifer was alive, repeating that she was alive. The detective reacted with disbelief, exclaiming, "Oh God." The suspect responded by saying that the detective had no idea how hard he had prayed for that, mentioning that he was a believer in Christ but had no idea about her status. He added that it was just about 2 days later when he ran away and took off. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He claimed he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't remember why he had stopped near her apartment, and didn't understand why he had acted so cruelly towards her. Bradford also shared a significant detail that investigators were unaware of. After the attack, he felt intense guilt. He wanted to pull the trigger but ultimately changed his mind. Following this, he was admitted to a psychiatric ward, which was the same hospital where Jennifer was still receiving treatment at that time. He had been very close to her at that time. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years had been arrested. Jennifer expressed that when they called her that morning and told her that they had really arrested Dennis Bradford, it was the most moment of her life and meant everything to her. She conveyed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise and, above all, wanted to thank Detective Tim Cromie from the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison from the FBI for all their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. She emphasized that their promise from day one, never giving up on her case and hearing her voice while seeing her determination, meant a lot to her. Jennifer also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom since he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to select the court date and chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. She mentioned that she remembered staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect her victim impact statement, writing, erasing, and writing again, just trying to perfect what she wanted to say. She said that she had 19 years worth of things to say to that person. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung in his jail cell, which made her feel that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away. Jennifer went to Dennis's grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court, stating that Dennis Bradford had chosen the wrong little 8-year-old girl to try and murder because for 19 years, she had thought of him every single day and had helped in searching for him. She expressed that in her heart, she knew he was out there, and now she realized that by listening to her heart all those years and never giving up on finding him, she had been right. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and wondered if Dennis had heard her. At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg, and she took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Jennifer reflected on her experiences, mentioning that despite the horrific events caused by Dennis's actions, she faced yet another challenge in her life. She explained that as a result of the trauma, she almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, she noted that amidst the darkness, there were shining examples of kindness, particularly from Dr. Craig Witz, who, after hearing her story, generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. She shared that at the end of 2012, she and her partner welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah, expressing her disbelief by saying that it felt like a dream and questioning who would have thought that they would really be her happy ending. The criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, but he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She mentioned that they have gone through something in life that they can talk about, and she believes it is worth sharing it with others to instill hope. She expressed her hope that this would inspire others to use their voice to help someone else. Jennifer also added that, in the end, she is not a victim but instead victorious. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarah Ann Wood. Sarah Ann Wood was born on March 4, 1981, in New York. She grew up in a devoutly religious family. Her father was a pastor in a small town in the middle of the state. As the daughter of a pastor, Sarah spent a lot of time at her father's church, attending services. She attended Sunday school with her sister and brother. Outside of church, Sarah had many other interests. She enjoyed dancing, was passionate about poetry, and was an active member of her school's cheerleading squad. In her free time, Sarah enjoyed riding her bike around the neighborhood. The church, less than a mile from her home, was a frequent destination for her bike rides, whether she was attending a service, helping her father, or simply attending Sunday school. On August 18, 1993, 12-year-old Sarah rode her bike to church for Sunday school as usual. While other members of the church ran the classes, her father remained at home. Her parents expected her to return home in the afternoon right after classes ended. However, when the afternoon passed and she still had not returned, they began to worry. After waiting for a while, they went to the church, thinking that she might be with some friends, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. The teachers informed them that she had indeed left the church on her bicycle after school, carrying some books, colorful folders, and a small board. Her parents were even more worried because the trip home from church only took a few minutes, and it was unlikely that Sarah would go anywhere, since she had all her belongings with her. Moreover, she always came home to ask her parents for permission if she wanted to go somewhere, which made them even more worried. Her parents followed the path to the church, asking the neighbors if anyone had seen their daughter. Given the small size of the town and the popularity of her father through the church, dozens of people quickly joined the search effort. They soon found one person who had seen Sarah walking towards her home around 2:30 p.m., just a short distance away. This new information made her parents even more worried and convinced that something terrible had happened to Sarah, prompting them to contact the police. The search for Sarah began immediately, with the local police department deploying dozens of officers to search the area. The sheriff also called in the help of the fire department, increasing the number of people involved. As news of Sarah's disappearance spread, dozens of volunteers joined the effort, quickly growing the search party to hundreds in just a few hours. The initial search focused on the route between Sarah's church and her home, with officers thoroughly searching the fields and woods along the route. Their search soon yielded a disturbing discovery. Just a short distance into the woods, Sarah's bicycle was found leaning against a tree. Police zeroed in on the area and quickly found items Sarah had taken from Sunday school hidden under a bush. This discovery suggested that Sarah had been abducted. The police hypothesis was that an unknown assailant may have dragged her from the road into the woods, abandoned her belongings, and then driven her away. The police department allocated all available resources to the search, while Sarah's family created informational flyers about Sarah's disappearance. With the help of dozens of volunteers, they distributed these flyers not only in their town but also in neighboring cities. The first day of searching for Sarah yielded no results, despite the best efforts of the police and volunteers. They searched the area around the road thoroughly into the night but found no new clues. The search continued the next morning with more people joining in. The state police also joined the investigation, focusing on identifying possible suspects. People in the town were interviewed by the police, who hoped that anyone might have seen a strange person, an unfamiliar car, or any other information that might be related to Sarah's disappearance. Sarah's parents set up a makeshift headquarters with dozens of volunteers to help locate their missing daughter. They printed and distributed flyers while also trying to find witnesses or any clues related to Sarah. The local media soon picked up the story, and in a short time, news of Sarah's disappearance spread across the country. The police received more than 1,000 tips and thoroughly investigated each one, but they hit a dead end. Unfortunately, these leads continued to yield no results. The public, who helped her parents raise a substantial $150,000 reward for any information about Sarah's whereabouts. However, this effort also yielded no results. The active search phase lasted about a week, but eventually the police concluded that they were unlikely to find any valuable clues in the area. They resumed their investigation, now focusing on finding potential suspects. The police searched for Sarah, checking local residents and convicted criminals from neighboring towns, but none of these efforts yielded any new information. Sarah's parents frequently used the media to appeal to the public for any information that might help locate their daughter. Despite these efforts, her disappearance remained a mystery for nearly 6 months, until a sudden and unexpected turn of events changed everything. On January 7, 1994, 12-year-old Rebecca began walking to school from her home in a small town in Massachusetts. As she walked down a quiet street, she noticed a man walking alongside her. At first, Rebecca did not hear what he was saying because she was listening to music through her headphones. After removing them, the man pulled out a gun and ordered Rebecca to follow his instructions or she would get hurt. He then grabbed her coat and they continued walking in the same direction. Rebecca quickly realized that the man was leading her to a car, and she quickly came up with a plan. She pretended to have an asthma attack, struggling to breathe. She sat down on the ground, causing the man to let go of her jacket, but he grabbed her backpack instead. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Rebecca slipped off the backpack strap and ran away from her captor. She ran as fast as she could to a large group of people nearby, a few hundred yards away, and told them that someone had just tried to kidnap her. The captor, still behind him, got into his car, took Rebecca's backpack, and drove away. One of the witnesses decided to follow him in his car. He followed the captor for a few minutes, then stopped at the nearest gas station and called the police. The witness provided a partial license plate number and model, and shared Rebecca's description of the captor's appearance. The police began searching for the car, checking the database for matches. They also sent information to neighboring towns, and that evening, their efforts paid off. A police officer driving through a small town a few miles away suddenly noticed a car matching the description. He stopped and knocked on the door of the house where the car was parked. There were several people inside. When the police asked who owned the pickup truck, the owner replied that he no longer used the truck due to his vision loss. Instead, his neighbor, Louis Lint, 43, often used the truck. Louis, a handyman, helped his blind neighbor with various household chores in exchange for the use of the pickup truck. Louis told the police that he had last driven the truck the day before and had not used it since. However, the police still asked Louis to come to the station for questioning, which he agreed to. At the station, Louis repeatedly stated that he had not used the truck that day and denied any involvement in the kidnapping. A devout Christian, he stated that he spent most of his free time at church and would not commit such an act. While Lewis was at the station, the police took a photo of him and showed it to Rebecca and other witnesses in a photo lineup interspersed with photos of other men. All of the witnesses identified Lewis as the kidnapper. Rebecca, who had gotten a close look at Lewis as he was less than a foot away from her, was certain that he was the one who had tried to kidnap her. Based on this information, the police quickly obtained a search warrant for Lewis' home and the vehicles in a pickup truck owned by his neighbor. The search of the vehicles led to a disturbing discovery: a small bag containing duct tape, a knife, children's sunglasses, and candy in the truck, which belonged to Lewis and was also parked near their home. A further search of the home turned up a gun and Rebecca's backpack. A search of the property revealed a shocking discovery: a large secret room under construction underneath the house. With this accumulated evidence, the police arrested Lewis for attempted kidnapping. Lewis initially maintained his innocence but eventually decided to confess to the crime. He confessed to coming to Rebecca's town to find victims and carrying a bag in his car that he called his kidnapping kit. Lewis's reason for digging a secret room under his house shocked even the police. He planned to turn the place into a bunker, fully equipped to hold his kidnapping victims. His plan included kidnapping 11 girls between the ages of 12 and 17 to satisfy his creepy desires. Once the room was completed, Lewis did not plan to hold his victims for long, intending to kill them within a short period of time, usually a few days. A list was also discovered at Lewis's home, which contained the names of several children living nearby. Further investigation revealed that Lewis had shortlisted these people as potential targets once his secret bunker was completed. Following his confession, Lewis was jailed pending trial for attempted kidnapping. The police continued to visit him to gather more information, and during one of these visits, he unexpectedly confessed to another crime. Lewis revealed that 4 years earlier, in October 1990, he had worked as a janitor at a movie theater in the same town where he later attempted to kidnap Rebecca. On the evening of October 22nd, he left work and saw 12-year-old James Bernardo riding his bicycle near the parking lot. Lewis immediately decided to kidnap the boy with the intention of assaulting him. There were no witnesses in the parking lot, and he had a bag containing a kidnapping kit in his truck, the same bag police later found during a search. Lewis initially offered James $5 to help arrange seats in the theater, which James accepted. However, upon arriving, Lewis tied James up. Lewis then drove his truck closer to the entrance, pulled James and his bike into the truck, and took James to his house. Lewis left James at home and drove to a nearby lake, where he dumped the bike. After returning home, Lewis attempted to attack James but was unsuccessful. Feeling the need to get rid of James, Lewis put him in his truck and drove to a neighboring state. There, Lewis killed James and dumped his body in the woods. A hunter soon discovered the body and reported the incident to the police. Despite an investigation, law enforcement was unable to identify a suspect for many years. When police compared Lewis's testimony with existing case information, they discovered many facts and accurate details about the crime. This confirmation was completely true. After his confession, news of Lewis spread rapidly throughout the country. Within days, the police realized that Lewis was a suspect not only in a failed kidnapping attempt and a secret underground bunker. He also confessed to a previously unknown murder. News of Lewis's case eventually reached the police in New York, who were looking for Sarah and Wood. They looked into the details surrounding Rebecca's kidnapping and requested more information about Lewis. Prior to this, analysts had created a profile of Sarah's potential kidnapper, and Lewis seemed to fit the bill. As a result, the police decided to interview him and visit him in prison. During the interrogation, Lewis mentioned that he frequently traveled to neighboring states to visit relatives. During these trips, he sometimes drove through small towns to look for potential victims. On August 18, 1993, Lewis claimed to have encountered Sarah walking along a road with her bicycle beside her. He said he stopped his car, got out of it, and forced Sarah into his truck at gunpoint. After tying her up, Lewis hid her belongings and bicycle in the woods a short distance from the road to delay their discovery. After driving Sarah hundreds of miles from her home, he took her to a remote area by a large mountain lake. There, he brutally attacked and murdered her. Lewis then dug a grave and buried her body. He chose not to reveal the exact location of Sarah's burial. However, Lewis provided police with a detailed account of the crime, as he had done with his previous victims. In an effort to find the body, police launched a large search operation around the lake. They enlisted the help of hundreds of volunteers, rangers, and the military. However, there was a significant obstacle. The sheer size of the lake made it nearly impossible for the search party to cover the entire area, even with so many people involved. And since it had been months since the burial, the site was likely overgrown. After weeks of searching, the group was unable to find a body or any evidence. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the detailed and precise testimony provided was enough to convict Lewis of the murders of Sarah and James. In January 1995, Lewis was sentenced to 17 to 20 years in prison for the attempted kidnapping of Rebecca. The following June, the trial for James's murder began, and Lewis pleaded guilty before the judge. He also told his lawyer that he wanted to confess to Sarah's murder immediately, but when he entered the courtroom and saw her parents, he suddenly changed his mind. However, just 9 days later, when he was brought into an empty courtroom, he finally admitted his guilt. Despite this, he continued to refuse to reveal the burial location, despite the desperate pleas from Sarah's parents. The prosecution struck a deal with Lewis, offering to serve his sentence in state prison instead of federal prison in exchange for his help in finding Sarah. Lewis agreed to work with the police and pointed out a location near the lake, even sketching out a preliminary map. Although the police wanted Lewis to join the search, his attorney advised against it. Despite the challenges posed by the snow and freezing temperatures, the police mounted a massive search effort using heavy equipment and the assistance of hundreds of volunteers, but unfortunately, they were unable to find Sarah. A few months later, as fall approached, the police conducted another search, but were still unsuccessful. During this time, the police repeatedly asked Lewis to provide more specific details about the location, but he refused to cooperate. As a result, the prosecution decided to cancel the deal. On April 11, 1997, Lewis was sentenced to the maximum possible prison sentence of 25 years. The judge made it clear that if Sarah's body was found, the sentence could be the death penalty. During the trial, Lewis's attorney attempted to reduce his client's sentence. He admitted that Lewis was guilty of all 3 crimes, but argued that Lewis suffered from an undiagnosed mental disorder. Specifically, Lewis claimed to hear voices in his head and said that he had somehow communicated with protected aliens, but mental health experts found no evidence of a mental disorder. Instead, they concluded that he was probably faking it to avoid severe punishment. After the verdict, police frequently visited Lewis in prison in the hope of discovering Sarah's burial site. However, Lewis's behavior was erratic and he gave police several incorrect locations. He once stated that he was not ready to reveal the location because he had buried Sarah next to another victim and did not want anyone to find out who it was. Despite their grief, Sarah's parents also visited Lewis in prison, begging him to reveal where Sarah was buried. But Lewis refused to reveal this information. In addition to this case, police are investigating the possibility that Lewis may have been involved in other unsolved crimes. With his confession to the kidnapping of Sarah and James, investigators have considerable grounds to believe that Lewis had more victims. After Lewis was arrested, police discovered that he had made another attempt to kidnap a young girl several years earlier. He tried to abduct her from the street, but was thwarted when her father intervened. Although the family reported the incident to the police at the time, the police were unable to identify the perpetrator. It was not until Lewis's photo appeared in the newspaper that the girl and her father were able to identify him. In addition, Lewis was suspected of being involved in 4 unsolved disappearances between 1985 and 1992. Although police believed he was capable of these crimes, they could not find any concrete evidence, and Lewis refused to admit to the crimes. After his conviction, police continued to visit Lewis in the hopes of finding out more information about Sarah's disappearance or his possible involvement in other crimes. For 8 years, Lewis remained uncooperative, but in 2013, he confessed that he was responsible for one of the crimes he was suspected of. According to Lewis, on November 6, 1992, he kidnapped a 16-year-old boy with disabilities who was on his way to visit his grandmother. Lewis claimed that he forced the boy into his truck, killed him, and then dumped his body in a lake. Police confirmed his involvement based on his detailed description of the events, but to this day, formal charges have not been filed against him in the case. Lewis is now 73 years old and is still serving a prison sentence for 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted kidnapping. Sarah's parents remain hopeful that he may eventually reveal her burial site, either through their persuasion or in a confession before his death. In Sarah's memory, her family has established an annual charity bike ride, which started out as a small event but has grown in popularity over time. Today, the event attracts thousands of participants who not only honor Sarah's memory but also contribute to fundraising efforts to help find missing children. Police have no plans to give up their search for Sarah's burial site, regardless of Lewis' willingness to reveal the information. They intend to continue searching the areas he has indicated until they find her. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak, born June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podak. In high school, Matthew was a member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy and later worked at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. Although this provided opportunities for advancement, but Matthew encountered difficulty to connect with his co-workers, who may have felt jealous of his privileged position. His sister, Chrissy Duca, attributed the tension was partly due to rumors of a possible promotion, which his colleagues believed he did not deserve. Outside of work, Matthew was an outdoors enthusiast who enjoyed activities such as boating, camping, and hunting. He also played softball and hockey during his free time. In 2003, Matthew met Holly McFeature, and they began dating shortly after, eventually they moving in together in Cleveland. The relationship marked a new chapter in Matthew's life. Friends said that he was eager to settle down and start a family. Matthew and Holly had 2 children together, Samantha and Josh, and also raised Holly's child from a previous relationship as part of their family. Matthew's mother, Patricia, said he loved Holly very much, and his feelings for her were sincere. Matthew's life underwent a drastic change when he transformed from a bachelor to a father of 3 in a short period. Initially, his relationship with Holly was filled with love and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their romance had turned sour, becoming increasingly argumentative and strained. On multiple occasions, Matthew would leave home after a fight with Holly and spend the night with a friend. Friends, who had grown concerned about the relationship, advised Matthew to end things with Holly, citing her selfish behavior as a major red flag. Despite their warnings, Matthew refused to listen and continually returned to Holly. Furthermore, Matthew had taken out a life insurance policy that named Holly as the beneficiary. Despite the advice of friends to remove her from the policy, Matthew did not make any changes. During this time, Matthew's behavior was erratic, which ranged from extreme happiness to intense anger, upset, and fear. According to Matthew's best friend, Russell, he had become depressed during this time. However, he seemed overly optimistic about his future, particularly when it came to raising his 3 children, a prospect that filled him with both hope for the future. Russell advised Matthew to take precautions and remove the guns from their home due to the volatile situation they were in. After the hockey season ended in 2006, he started online gambling, which resulted in him losing a lot of money. His family and friends noticed that he was struggling with depression and advised him to see a doctor. He followed their advice and was prescribed antidepressants. By the spring of 2006, Matthew's health started to deteriorate. His condition worsened by Memorial Day weekend, causing Russell to become extremely concerned about Matthew's physical well-being. Around that time, Russell had asked him for help transferring a motor from one boat to another. However, he was no longer the strong person he once was, experiencing severe back pain and complaining of excessive sweating and a lack of strength. Russell urged Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. He scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, he called Russell to ask for directions to the doctor's office. During their conversation, Russell could hear Holly arguing with Matthew in the background. Matthew visited the doctor, complaining of back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed him with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help pass the stones and alleviate the associated pain. In a phone call to his father on the afternoon of July 30th, Matthew shared his excitement about buying a new fishing rod for his daughter. He was looking forward to taking her fishing, hoping they could go together soon, along with his father. Matthew's anticipation for their upcoming family outing were evident in the conversation with his father. On the evening of the same day, Matthew attended a party with Russell. He found Matthew's health condition alarming. Matthew had gained significant weight, was sweating excessively, and struggled to walk. Matthew also complained of severe back pain. Later that evening, Matthew's condition worsened, and Holly became concerned. She called 911 and then contacted Matthew's father, informing him that something was wrong with his son. Matthew's father had a brief phone conversation with him and found he to be confused and very distressed. Matthew was rushed to the emergency room at Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected he was experiencing organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he was suffering from metabolic acidosis, a condition where the blood becomes highly acidic. Dr. Mandat, an emergency room doctor, suspected that Matthew had ingested a toxic substance, such as methanol or antifreeze. When questioned, Holly denied the possibility that Matthew had swallowed antifreeze or medical alcohol, asserting that he had not consumed anything that could have caused harm. On July 31, 2006, Matthew passed away at the hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandat's testimony, Matthew's death was not caused by respiratory problems, as metabolic acidosis typically is. Instead, Dr. Mandat explained that ethylene glycol can also cause this condition. After Matthew's death, his family and friends were overcome with grief, but Holly seemed unaffected. In the days that followed, her friend Rebecca Vega tried to offer support and accompanied her to the funeral home. However, Vega noticed that Holly did not feel sad at all. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to join the family in the main room to receive visitors, and even then, she appeared to be unfeeling and indifferent. Russell recalled that Holly acted like it was a normal gathering, showing no signs of grief. The day after Matthew's death was particularly telling. Holly used Matthew's bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, draining his bank account. When Matthew's mother reported Holly's suspicious behavior to the police, Holly was arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery. She later agreed to restitution and was placed on probation for 1 year. Holly was the beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although the policy was relatively small, and she received only $10,000 after his death. 2 weeks later, her friend Rebecca visited Holly and noticed various cleaning supplies, including what appeared to be solvents, left out in the open. Since there were small children living in the house, Rebecca found this absurd and asked Holly about it. She calmly explained that one of the items was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell disagreed with this and stated that Matthew's boat had not been operational since its engine broke down in 2004 or 2005. Holly's demeanor after Matthew's death raised concerns with others. For example, she had an intimate relationship with Michael Jaima, a Cleveland police officer, who would often visit her home for coffee. Michael had known Holly since 2002. One day, Michael called Holly to ask if he should come to her house at this time. She replied that there was no need to worry about it anymore, because Matthew died last week, without showing any emotion. She attributed Matthew's death to kidney issues and pain from playing hockey, but her tone came across as careless and heartless. Following Matthew's death, his belongings were removed from the house. Holly asked a friend to erase some content from Matthew's computer and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt. 6 weeks after Matthew's passing, Holly began dating Charles Lipham, a Cleveland police officer. Initially, she told Charles that Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, after the autopsy report was released in January 2007, she changed her story. The autopsy revealed that Matthew had an unusually large amount of ethylene glycol in his system, the key ingredient in antifreeze. Later, Holly told Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken something to end his life. The autopsy report confirmed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine how or why he ingested the substance. It's worth noting that Holly told Charles that she didn't know what antifreeze was. Holly also provided conflicting explanations for Matthew's death, telling friend Sean Walsh that Matthew had died in an industrial accident. She also said that one of his co-workers might have poisoned him out of envy due to his connection to the boss. However, Matthew's family suspects that the truth behind his death may have been caused by someone close to him. This skepticism is partly due to Holly's indifferent attitude at the funeral, which contrasted with claims from Holly's sister that she had been crying in a car beforehand. During the investigation, detectives discovered 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of the house Holly had relocated from, which they took into evidence in 2007. The findings were recorded in a police report. Later in 2007, after parting ways with Charles, Holly met Jameson Kennedy while working at a bar. As they started dating, Holly chose not to share any details about Matthew's death with Jameson. However, Jameson has a troubled past, with multiple convictions and struggles with addiction. One evening in September 2008, Holly and Jameson were together, consuming alcohol, and Take Action intimate. According to Jameson, Holly became emotional, she began crying, and confided in him about Matthew's death. She expressed her desire to leave Cleveland and put the past behind her. Holly confessed to putting something in Matthew's drinks that made him ill and ultimately led to his death. However, Jameson was unsure if she was telling the truth. Seeking advice, Jameson met with his friend Santiago Feliciano, a lawyer, and shared Holly's confession with him. Santiago recommended that Jameson report this information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then called Holly to discuss her earlier confession, unaware that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she will turn herself in and admit that she is the one who caused Matthew's death. Instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming Matthew, claiming Jameson was misinterpreting her. The conversation between Holly and Jameson caused a rift in their relationship. Jameson began to suspect that Holly was cheating on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to her house to confront her. Feeling threatened, Holly called the police. When the officers arrived, Jameson attacked them and was subsequently arrested and charged with assault. Jameson was sentenced to 10 years in prison after being found guilty of assaulting officers. Following his arrest, he informed the police about a confession he'd have heard from Holly, reportedly linking her to the death of Matthew. This added to the evidence of Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. The police initially investigated the death in 2007 after the autopsy report was released, but the case stalled for many years because they initially did not consider it an intentional act. To re-examine the case, it is essential to look at the autopsy report. Dr. Galita, an experienced forensic pathologist and medical examiner, conducted the autopsy. Then, Dr. Galita and County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balch released their autopsy report in January 2007. The report determined Matthew's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning, although the circumstances surrounding it were unclear. When Matthew ingested ethylene glycol, it entered his bloodstream and was quickly broken down by his liver using an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. This process converted the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form sharp calcium oxalate crystals. A large number of these crystals accumulated in Pax's kidneys, causing a blockage that disrupted their function. According to Dr. Galita, the severe pain Matthew experienced in his side starting on May 20, 2006, was likely caused by the crystals in his kidneys. When Dr. Galita examined Matthew's kidneys, he found two significant things. In addition to kidney damage, there are signs that the kidneys are beginning to heal. Further examination revealed the emergence of the crystals in Matthew's heart and brain, as well as severe acute myocarditis. Myocarditis is an acute inflammation of the heart muscle. The doctor stated that Matthew's myocarditis could not have been caused by an ingestion of ethylene glycol. Instead, the inflammation would have taken at least 3 weeks to develop. He also ruled out a heart attack as the cause of death. In conclusion, Dr. Galita determined that Matthew's death was the result of long-term ethylene glycol poisoning. He believed a series of but acute toxicity episodes, occurring over at least a 3-month period, ultimately led to his death. Matthew often drank iced tea at work, particularly raspberry flavor. He usually brought it in a thermos or the container. A Matthew's friend, Michael Mao, testified that Holly frequently brought Matthew lunch at work. His meal often came with a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. The police found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's former home in August 2007. The bottles, one a Peak brand and the other a Saturn brand, were discovered after she had moved out. 3 years after Matthew's autopsy results were released, a report amendment was made to the report in 2010. The revised report, signed by County Coroner Dr. Frank Miller, confirmed that Matthew died from poisoning by ethylene glycol, a toxin found in antifreeze, in long term, and deemed the death a homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, the authorities decided it was time to arrest Holly. She was formally charged in July of that year with the serious offense of depriving Matthew of his life. Holly's charges came as no surprise to Matthew's family. According to his older brother, Mark, they suspected Holly's involvement in his younger brother's death all along. Mark stated that Holly's behavior around the time of the death raised suspicions, saying she just wasn't acting like somebody who was losing a loved one. Authorities suspected that Holly had been secretly poisoning Matthew by adding antifreeze to his cold raspberry tea for several weeks or even months. In 2013, she went to court, pleading not guilty to the charges. However, there was no direct evidence, only indirect indications of her guilt. To prove their case, the prosecution called 15 witnesses to testify. These witnesses included Matthew's family and friends, Dr. Galita, who conducted the autopsy, Dr. Thomas Mandat, who was Matthew's doctor, and several police officers who investigated the case. Witnesses focused on several key points, including Holly's suspicious actions, a phone call Matthew made before visiting the doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not owned a functioning boat since 2004. Which meant he had no use for antifreeze. Holly's defense team countered by stating that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her as guilty and then pressured law enforcement to bring charges against her following Matthew's death. The prosecution's strongest testimony came from Dr. Galita, the medical examiner in charge of performing the autopsy. Dr. Galita provided a detailed explanation for his conclusion that Matthew was the victim of chronic poisoning over a period of 3 months. He arrived at this conclusion because on the emergence of crystals in Matthew's kidneys and myocarditis, a type of inflammation of the heart muscle that can be caused by exposure to ethylene glycol. After ruling out causes other of myocarditis, such as infection, Dr. Galita emphasized that Matthew's condition could not have been the result of a single, short-term exposure to ethylene glycol. Dr. Galita also clarified why the initial autopsy report, completed in 2007, did not indicate that Matthew's death was intentional. He explained that, at the time, the coroner's office did not have enough information to make this determination, which led to the manner of death being listed as undetermined. However, after further investigation, the report was revised. The testimony of other witnesses supported Dr. Galita's findings. Matthew's friends reported that his health began to decline in the spring of 2006, which was confirmed by his diagnosis of kidney stones in July 2006. The friends also described a volatile relationship between Matthew and Holly, stating that Matthew seemed fearful and had removed his firearms from the home at the advice of a friend. Holly's lawyers claimed that their client was not involved in Matthew's death, suggesting instead that Matthew's depression led him to end his life. According to the defense, Matthew was struggling with losses from online gambling, work-related issues, and difficulties communicating with his child, ultimately leading him to deliberately ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense argued that Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze rather than from prolonged exposure over several weeks or months. In support of this theory, they brought Dr. Robert Lux to testify in court, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado. Dr. Lux testified that Matthew's death was a result of acute poisoning due to a single ingestion of ethylene glycol, indicating a possible suicidal intent. He disputed Dr. Galita's diagnosis of myocarditis and instead believed Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Furthermore, Dr. Lux explained that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning and that flank pain is not typically a symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. He said that there was no connection between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning, a relevant detail in the case. Several key witnesses testified during the trial. One notable witness was Jameson Kennedy, a felon who had been serving a 10-year sentence for assaulting police officers. Jameson claimed that Holly had confessed to him that she had mixed something into Matthew's drinks. However, Holly denied ever making such a statement. Holly argued that Jameson's testimony was motivated by a desire for leniency in his own case or revenge against her. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts. On August 28, 2013, the court sentenced Holly McFeature to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Widmer. Sarah and Ryan Widmer met at a favorite coffee shop. Ryan ordered a cup of coffee while Sarah was waiting in line and happened to see a book on his table that she had just finished reading. Their shared interest in literature opened up their first conversation. Gradually, They spent many hours discussing common topics such as books, movies, music, and daily routines. Through the conversation, they discovered that they both loved nature, travel, and animals. After each meeting, their relationship became closer and more trusting of each other. Their understanding and trust grew more and more. Finally, their relationship developed into love. After a few months of dating, Ryan proposed to Sarah at a romantic sunset at the same coffee shop where they met. Sarah felt very happy and agreed to the proposal. The young couple planned their wedding and found a two-story house in Hamilton. Finally, on April 10, 2008, their wedding took place. They chose a small church to hold the wedding ceremony, with the participation of close friends and beloved family. Everything, even the smallest details, was planned by Sarah in a special way. On the important day, Sarah looked gorgeous and beautiful, and Ryan couldn't take his eyes off her. After the wedding and the party, the couple decided to go on a honeymoon to the Hawaiian Islands, where they spent 2 weeks exploring the beautiful paradise and enjoying time together. At this time, they were deeply in love and had already planned for the future, dreaming of having children. On the evening of Monday, August 11, 2008, after finishing work at the dental clinic, Sarah met Ryan at a cafe. They had dinner and talked happily. After that, they walked home. Sarah packed her groceries and sat down on the couch. Ryan brought her a glass of water and a headache pill. He gave her a bath, and they finished watching their favorite TV show together. Sarah went upstairs to the bedroom. She undressed, folded her clothes neatly, prepared a towel, lit a scented candle, and turned on her favorite music. Ryan pressed the button on the TV remote, pausing a few times on the football game. He lay on the couch for no more than 10 minutes. He called his wife, but Sarah didn't hear him, so he slowly went upstairs. In the bedroom, Ryan turned on the TV and called Sarah again. There was silence. In a panic, he went into the bathroom, where he found Sarah lying face down in the bathtub. Ryan unplugged the bathtub and took out his phone to call 911. At 10:49 p.m., under the direction of the police, Ryan finally got Sarah out of the bathtub and performed CPR on her. Within 6 minutes, an ambulance and police were at Ryan's home. An initial inspection of the scene caught the attention of the police. The bathroom was dry and clean, with no signs of water or scattered objects. Sarah was lying on the bedroom floor, naked, her skin dry. Only her wet hair suggested she had drowned. A paramedic performed CPR when there was no pulse. A pinkish-white fluid flowed from Sarah's nose and mouth. 2 attempts to intubate Sarah while she was lying on the bedroom floor were unsuccessful. Sarah was then rushed to the emergency room and 2 more attempts were made to bring her heart rate back to normal with a defibrillator, both unsuccessful. During this time, Ryan remained by his wife's side. Within 20 minutes of arriving at the hospital, they attempted to revive Sarah, but at 11:41 p.m., an emergency room doctor pronounced her dead. Ryan knelt in the hospital hallway and cried. Relatives and friends of the couple could not have imagined that just 4 months after their wedding, a tragedy would strike that would shock the entire city and make Ryan the prime suspect in Sarah's death. When the police questioned him at the hospital, Ryan's initial statements raised suspicions. Ryan claimed that he and his wife had been home that night. They had dined out, returned home, and watched TV. Then, because his wife had a headache, Ryan gave her painkillers and led her to the bathroom. Some details in Ryan's statement did not match the emergency call records. The victim had collapsed face down, while Ryan said his wife was lying face up. This discrepancy made the police question Ryan's statement. Ryan was deeply shocked by what had happened. He kept calling Sarah's name. Under pressure from the police, Ryan was forced to participate in the investigation to find out information about Sarah's death. He agreed to allow his house to be searched. Analysis of the medication Sarah had taken showed that it was a common painkiller commonly used to treat headaches and migraines. However, she had been taking a course of medication that altered her hormones and caused her to fall into an uncontrollable sleep. After searching the house, traces of blood were found on the carpet. During the investigation, the police discovered several signs that made them suspicious of Ryan's story. When they arrived at the scene, the bathtub and tiles were dry with no signs of water. No wet items, clothing, or other items were found in the house that could have soaked up the water. The autopsy revealed that Sarah had several injuries to her body, including bruises to her head, neck, armpits, and lips. However, there were no signs of a struggle or resistance. Sarah's fingernails were intact, not broken or chipped. This does not fit the theory that Sarah was murdered after a struggle. Sarah's autopsy, conducted by Dr. Russell Appointment Grove, showed that she died of drowning. During the autopsy, experts also discovered multiple muscle hemorrhages in the front of her neck and bruises on her head. These injuries were determined to have occurred before her death. However, the cause of these injuries is still unknown. Toxicology tests ruled out the presence of illegal substances or alcohol in Sarah's blood. This makes the question of what caused her death even more difficult to answer. On August 13, 2008, Ryan was arrested on suspicion of murdering his wife. The charge was based on the emergency call, a scene that did not match the reality, and the injuries on Sarah's body. This was enough to charge him with murdering his wife. Ryan and Sarah were very much in love, as friends and neighbors confirmed. They never argued or fought in public and always planned their lives. What caused Sarah's death? In March 2009, the first trial began with emergency line officer Ron Cronenberger taking the stand. He described the phone conversation with Ryan as calm and relaxed. However, Ron Cronenberger also said that Ryan appeared to be just blowing into the tube, pretending to perform CPR. The prosecution argued that the information from the 911 call, the scene, and Sarah's injuries were enough to prove that Ryan killed her by forcing her underwater and drowning her in the bathtub. The main piece of evidence in the case was the bathtub. Police examined the bathtub for fingerprints and found what they believed to be human handprints. These were located closer to the middle of the bathtub. Using a reflective ultraviolet photographic process, fingerprints and stains were found on the bathtub. A fingerprint was found on the forearm, and hair follicle testing determined that it was left by an adult male, but the age of the fingerprint could not be determined. The police called in a medical expert, who testified that falling asleep and dying in a bathtub was unlikely unless illegal drugs or alcohol were involved. According to the expert, the sensation of water on the face could have awakened the person or triggered a reflex response to the airway. Otherwise, the reduction in oxygen in the muscles would have likely awakened the victim. In addition, the pathologist who performed the autopsy was called to testify. He stated that if Sarah had a dry body and wet hair, a likely explanation would be that her head had been pushed off the edge of the bathtub, toilet, or sink. She could have been pushed forward or backward, in running water or in a full bathtub. According to the prosecution's case, Ryan held Sarah's head underwater until she drowned, and on that basis, he should be convicted. Ryan's defense attorney argued that he was innocent, and that he had no motive to kill Sarah. The attorney said that if there had been a violent struggle, as the prosecution argued, there would have been evidence of that. However, there were no injuries on Ryan, and Sarah's fingernails were not broken or chipped. The attorney said that the injuries found on Sarah were the result of prolonged CPR, direct cardiac massage, and multiple attempts at intubation that night in the house, in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and at the hospital itself. At the defense's request, a second autopsy was performed. Dr. Werner Spitz performed a second autopsy and again confirmed that the cause of death was drowning. He observed injuries to her neck, arms, upper lip, skull, a lacerated liver, and bleeding from her neck, but could not determine whether these injuries were due to CPR. Those present argued that the paramedics had been trying to resuscitate Sarah for about 45 minutes and that the deep bleeding inside Sarah's neck could have been caused by N4 being inserted into the area because paramedics could not reach the veins in her arms. Instead of ruling it a homicide, Dr. Werner Spitz ruled Sarah's death undetermined. The defense said her skin was dry because it dries faster than her hair. They also said that when Ryan found his wife unconscious, he pushed the drain in the bathtub, tried to help her, and called emergency services. This chain of events explains why her body was drier than expected. The water had drained out of the bathtub even before Ryan called 911. However, it is not yet known whether the jury's verdict would have changed if they had received credible evidence that Sarah's medical condition could have caused the drowning. The official reason for denying a new trial was that the jury had made errors in its investigation. Ryan was surprised when Jennifer Cruz came to the prosecutor's office to testify about Ryan's guilt. She said she was friends with Ryan and that he had been in regular contact with her by phone or email. According to Jennifer's testimony, he called on October 26, 2009, at 11:09 p.m. In a very upset voice, he told her that he had beaten Sarah in the living room on the day of her death. Sarah had discovered his infidelity and had seen inappropriate photos. They had argued for a long time, first downstairs and then in the bedroom. Ryan pushed her into the bathroom and left his wife there without checking to see what had happened to her. He was angry, and after calming down, he found Sarah floating in a bathtub full of water. To cover his tracks, he wiped up the water on the bathroom floor with a towel and came up with a plan for the accident. Ryan's attorneys worked hard to prove his innocence. They tried to throw out Jennifer's testimony because they thought it was unreasonable. One obvious example was that no towels were found in the house, including the dryer. And there was no evidence of infidelity in their marriage. The family had no financial problems and never argued. Ryan was described by friends as a kind and helpful person who never showed anger. Ryan would not benefit from his wife's death because he did not have a life insurance policy. Before the third trial began, Jennifer was discredited and barred from testifying. The call that Ryan allegedly confessed to her was not authenticated. In January 2011, a trial was held based on new evidence. The defense argued that Sarah had underlying medical conditions that could have caused her to suddenly lose consciousness and drown. Several medical experts testified in support of the defense, stating that some heart or neurological defect could have led to the loss of consciousness. However, the state's medical experts disagreed with this assessment. The trial also revealed additional details about Sarah's health and daily routine. Her co-workers testified that she often slept in her car before going to work at the dental office due to severe allergies and stomach aches. On the day of her death, Sarah had complained of headaches and stomach aches to her dentist boss. That evening, Sarah talked to a friend and mentioned her headaches and neck pain, and her friend said she looked extremely tired. Her ability to fall asleep quickly led her friends to think she might have narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness. People with narcolepsy often have difficulty staying awake and need to take frequent naps to cope. However, Sarah's mother, Ruth Ann Stewart, disputed this idea when she testified as a prosecution witness at trial. She claimed that she had never seen her daughter have sleep problems and described Sarah as a healthy and active child with a regular daily routine. Sarah's medical records also supported this claim. As a dental hygienist, Sarah had undergone regular checkups and her last checkup showed no signs of health problems. In addition, other witnesses who claimed Sarah was excessively sleepy gave unconvincing testimony. In cases where a person tries to strangle another from behind, the victim often suffers defensive injuries to the arms and legs, as well as injuries to the small bones in the neck. However, Sarah's autopsy did not show any such injuries. The defense urged the jury to consider all the facts surrounding the case, that Ryan had no reason to harm Sarah. Once again, the defense was defeated. After about 12 hours of deliberations, Ryan was convicted of murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The jury based their decision on the lack of water on Sarah's body and around the bathtub, and that Ryan's call to 911 was staged. One juror felt that Ryan's demeanor in court was one of the main reasons he believed Ryan was guilty. When the autopsy photos were shown, they felt that Ryan was completely unresponsive. Ryan did not take a stand, although he told the court after the verdict was announced, he loved his wife. He did not hurt her. Ryan remains in custody, awaiting a federal court ruling that could determine his parole status. After 14 years in prison, his first chance for parole will be in July 2025. With each passing year, Ryan holds out hope that the next year will bring him freedom. He continues to maintain his innocence and profess his love for Sarah, insisting that he did not harm her. Ryan's chances of parole in 2025 appear slim, as the parole board tends to favor inmates who show remorse. Since Ryan has always maintained his innocence, he could face an uphill battle for parole.